Using his freedom of speech to its fullest extent, it's John James and Freedom's Pep Rally. Now, America's friendliest host, your buddy, John James.
We're unapologetic in our stance for what is right in this constitutional republic that we call home, and we are not about to lose it. And we have people fighting for us in the trenches and doing it for us every single day, like my next guest, who I share a first name with. We have Jonathan Emord, constitutional attorney. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Just fine. Great to be with you.
It's great to have you here, and I have looked forward to having you on because we are in such a troubling place right now. Now, the book that you've got, and I encourage this is going to be right up our listeners' alley. It's called The Authoritarians, Their Assault on Individual Liberty, the Constitution, and Free Enterprise from the 19th Century to the Present. And that goes right up to 2021. And it's getting worse. Is that not fair to say?
It is. It's getting worse, and it's getting worse at such a precipitous rate that the good news is we see the rise of citizen politicians. We're seeing people who say, look, I hate politics. I've never been involved with it in my life, but this is just over the top. I'm not going to allow my nation to fall into a never-ending socialist abyss. I am going to take action. And so we're seeing the rise of citizen politicians attacking those who are careerists, who are socialists, who have given in to this whole woke mentality. And they're saying, I've had enough. And it's magnificent. It's all over the nation. And it's the great hope for 2022. And it is the great benefit for the people of Virginia to see what can happen when mom and dad get angry.
Amen. And you're right. We're seeing it all over the country right now. And the thing that is hard for me to understand is because we are a constitutional republic, we have been the melting pot of the world for many, many years. Now, not so much because assimilation has become a bad word in this country. But people have thrived in the individual freedoms we all have and the capitalism we all enjoy, the ability to make our own decisions, to do business with whoever we want. It has been such a huge success for 245 years, but for some reason, in places like New Jersey, where they were dead even, they half wanted a Marxist and half wanted a conservative. California, where they had a chance to elect a great man in Larry Elder, a Constitution-loving capitalist, and they voted instead for Marxist Gavin Newsom, who has the populace under his thumb. What does that say about the division in this country? Moreover, what does it say about all the people who are buying into the real big lie, Jonathan?
Well, we have to understand that the socialists who appear now overtly everywhere have actually been a part of the establishment, have been within government, largely in the administrative state, all the way back to the 1860s in the United States. So they have worked on the creation of an unconstitutional government, that is a government outside of the constitutional government, for many, 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 many years, for over 100 years. And it is their goal to have this socialist takeover. As I explain in my book, The Authoritarians, the roots are deep in America, and I name names and explain in detail how historically that has been the case, really, since the end of the Civil War. And what we see is this small band of highly rabid socialists across the country receiving public support from government and receiving substantial funding from people like George Soros, who have massive resources to make them able to make them huge figures in local communities. And these people have succeeded in taking over governments and the education establishment. And it's largely because a silent majority has been in place. And we are, people should not fear that the American people buy into this. By and large, they don't. But there are a substantial number of Democrats who accept it. We know that over a majority of Democrats have no problem with socialism. They like the promises of free things, which of course are never free if they have value that results in inflation or taxation. But they bought into this. They've been drinking the Kool-Aid. They went along with the party leadership to accept socialism. They said, okay, let's go for a swim in that pool, not realizing that it was really a toxic swamp. But they're starting to wake up, and you see that with the independents shifting. People are saying, hey, I don't want to lose everything that made America great. I really can't. I may have thought that if I could get something for free, I'd sacrifice some liberty, but that was a bad deal. And good thing the socialists are moving so fast, because they have brought the rude awakening of socialism to these people who were sunshine patriots. And they forced them to decide whether they're just going to remain sunshine patriots or whether they're going to take a stand in defense of their rights and their liberty and their property. And fortunately, a good number are doing that. And I suspect more and more and more will do it. I think by 2022, we're going to see a tidal wave of Republican victories all across the United States as people try to take back the liberties that are being wrenched from them today.
That sure is what we're hoping for. And do you think that's one of the reasons why they are fast tracking everything from the vaccine to the open borders and illegal immigration to you name it? I mean, giving potentially $450,000 to each individual illegal alien, which apparently Joe Biden didn't even know they were going to do.
Right, the man with temporal and spatial awareness issues. He actually was aware of that. I think that's a big lie on his part. But anyway, I think what's happening is that and this is very clear from Chuck Schumer, for example. If you look back to what he said publicly a number of months ago, and actually on the floor of the Senate, he was sounding this alarm bell that these things have to happen now. We have to move quickly. And they appreciate that this is essentially a political kamikaze mission in large measure. He's secure where he is, but by and large, they can throw Joe Biden to the dogs. They don't mind that, and he doesn't either, because he's not going to run again. Or if he does run again, he would not be allowed to be the standard bearer for the party, because he's pushing this agenda no matter what. You notice that ever since he became president, there's been no action either by him or by people with greater lucidity in his administration to publicly defend the actions that are taken. They just take the actions. They cause the loss of all the Keystone XL pipeline workers, all the people in the fracking industry that were relying on the leases. They make us lose our energy independence. They cause inflation, rampant inflation, but they never answer for it. They're never responsible for their actions. Highly unusual, even in the sense that socialists indeed, and although perhaps not in name, like Obama and others, Clinton, for example, they took actions, but they felt the necessity of responding to the public. Joe Biden won't even answer media inquiries at all.
Right.
And the reason is that he does not care. This is not ultimately about what he's doing. He wants to make America a socialist nation. He is just implementing the Pelosi-Schumer program for America, which is they passed the socialist Rubicon before the election in 2020, when they said that if Bernie Sanders were the standard bearer, that they would fully support him and that they would support his agenda. They said that within a day of one another, and made clear they had passed the Rubicon. Now the Democratic Party was the party of the socialists, and they would pursue that agenda. They got Biden, and they have Biden pursuing that agenda, and he will continue to pursue that agenda. You know, some naive people are saying, "Oh well, he's gonna back down from that because the political opposition is so intense." I mean, let's go, Brandon. That there's going to be this, that there's going to be this this earthquake where people are going to rebel in large numbers and we're going to never win again. The Democratic Party will be eternally fractured. But do you see any real concern about that with Pelosi or Schumer or anybody else? No, they're not acting like typical politicians. Why? Because this is the massive power grab time. They've got to get it done. They're going to ram this through. If they can get enough socialist swill into the mouths of Americans, they think Americans are going to be transformed into socialists and that they will be there forever. Forget about free and fair elections. They'll be there. So this is a one shot, moon shot for them. If they can make it, then they're there and everything's happy. They get to rule like dictators and live like pigs, and the rest of us get to have poverty and mediocrity in eternity.
That's great. That is such good information. So well put. We're talking with Jonathan Emord, constitutional law attorney. The book is The Authoritarians, Their Assault on Individual Liberty, the Constitution, and Free Enterprise from the 19th century to the present, right up to this year. And my analogy was, and I've got a question from a listener here I want to get to, and anybody who wants to ask a question, I'm going to try to keep my eye on the stream. So please feel free to go ahead and ask, and I will pass it along to Jonathan here. I like, my analogy was after Trump lost the election, that in my mind was clearly stolen, and they covered it up. Not well, but they covered it up as best they could, and they're willing, they're useful idiots went along and called it a baseless claim that he had the election stolen. But I likened it right after he lost to us being in the fourth quarter of a football game, and we're down, and we've got our fourth down and goal. And if we don't make it, if we lose the game, socialism wins and America is done. Now, I'm starting to change my way of thinking, and I love your analogies. And my new analogy is, okay, so now they're down by 5 points. A touchdown's going to win it for them, and now they're getting ready to throw the Hail Mary. Is that about where we are right now?
Yeah, that is. But unfortunately for us, they can throw the Hail Mary publicly, but behind the scenes, they can actually have the football appear in the end zone. And the reason is the administrative state operates underground. We don't see what they're doing. They're the socialist cockroaches. They're making the agenda of this administration happen even when Congress doesn't pass it. And the reason for that is that administrative state, that socialist administrative state, has existed in this country for dozens of years. And it really arose in the progressive era with a vengeance. And then the New Deal put it on steroids, and it has been on steroids ever since. I know that well. I litigate and have for the last 35 years against the administrative state in federal court. And I know what that state is made of. And I know these unelected heads of these agencies do whatever they want, feather their own nests, advance their own interests, and take away the rights of American citizens and ruin businesses and irrevocably harm private property. And they get away with it, and they're never held to account. And so that's where he puts everything. Notice Joe Biden doesn't go to Congress with any major initiative. He goes directly to the administrative state. He doesn't want to have to defend himself. He doesn't want to have to defend. He wants to rule like a dictator. So when it comes to this vaccine mandate, he doesn't go to Congress with a bill. He goes straight to OSHA to have OSHA implement an immediate rule like a dictator on one of the most momentous public health initiatives ever undertaken by the federal government. It is inherently legislative under our constitutional scheme, and yet he does not go to Congress. Why? The infrastructure is there for him to simply use the administrative state to do whatever he wants. He doesn't have to go to Congress. He can rule like a dictator. So he's proving himself to be the first socialist president of the United States overtly in his actions. We've had people who've gone that way, but they felt the need to respond to the public. He's going that way like he's Maduro in Venezuela. He doesn't have to answer to anybody. He just does it. He knows he's a dictator. He's going to run these things through the administrative state. You know, I've got a pen and a phone, said Obama. Well, Biden intends to use the pen and the phone and to do his bidding directly through the executive agencies without ever answering to the people, without ever answering to Congress, without ever having to account for the atrocities that are occurring because of his open border policy with the south of the border, and then also with his just ridiculous and ignominious cut and run from Afghanistan. He never answers. He never is held to account. So there's a lot of pent-up demand out there with the American people, and he knows it. And he knows that if he ran again, he would be clobbered. So I think his plan is, I'm going to be the hero of this socialist movement. I'm going to die on my sword here in the office, and I'm going to do my best to bring about socialism. And if I get it, then I'm the first socialist president of the United States. He's one thing about Joe Biden. He is entirely hedonistic. I mean, this man with Hunter Biden, we know, shared bank accounts and, you know, traded on influence peddling for a good part of his career, certainly all through the vice presidency with the full knowledge of Obama. He was allowed to do this. And this is a guy who sells out the country for personal financial gain. That's what that means.
Right.
And so if he's willing to do that, if that's what his resume is, we should have no hesitation in believing that this doddering old fool is a sellout to socialists as president of the United States. He's going to be taken care of in you know, on his convalescent years. He knows that. He doesn't have to worry about where he's going. He's going to be taken care of by the communist Chinese. They'll take care of him.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they're beholden to the Chinese. John Kerry, Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, the whole Biden family. I mean, that's their. They don't want to make Xi Jinping mad at him because that's his retirement. And has been his living for many years too. Now, as a constitutional attorney, I wonder how any political class member can walk all over what we are guaranteed in the Constitution. We are guaranteed all of our individual rights. We are guaranteed freedom of speech. We are guaranteed our Second Amendment rights, a speedy trial. It seems they walk over the Constitution on a daily basis, and they don't care a lick. They never apologize. They're never held accountable by many of the feckless Republicans who should. There are some good Republicans in there. Don't get me wrong, Jonathan. We see them. We know who they are. They're very outspoken, and they are very direct in what they say, like Rand Paul has been up against Dr. Fauci. But there are many more who are not nearly as outgoing, and they do not call them out. They do not call out the administration, nor any of the other people involved with the administration, like the DOJ and the other unelected officials, when it comes to walking all over the Constitution. How can this be allowed to happen, and why is it?
It's happening because the movement in this direction started with the birth of the administrative state in America in the 1860s. It was overtly, at that time, designed to be a means by which they would avoid the strictures of the Constitution to achieve their quote-unquote common good goals, which was nothing more than an elitist narrative by which they would cause people they perceived to be experts to dictate to the rest of us how we would live our lives. And this led to, you know, enormous horrors like eugenics in America, where over 60,000 American citizens were forcibly sterilized from the early 1900s to 1980 in the United States, and all on a false philosophical and medical justification, the notion that somehow your offspring would inherit all of any characteristic they deemed to be unfit or deleterious. And so they were the first to come up with the quote-unquote ultimate solution that the Nazis just adopted, and that became the law of the land and the Buck versus Bell decision early on in the 20th century, when Oliver Wendell Holmes actually, it was one of the most brutal decisions in Supreme Court history, fully justified eugenics and said, in the case of Carrie Buck, who was entirely normal, but nonetheless deemed unfit, that she was an imbecile and that 3 generations of imbeciles was enough, he said. And so it was appropriate to cut her fallopian tubes. And he then ushered in, by that decision, this eugenics movement in the United States that resulted in the loss of 60,000 Americans to forcible sterilization. But anyway, I'm going a bit far afield. My point is that this whole movement to violate rights to achieve their objectives has been going on since the 1860s. And as a result, they have no hesitation in violating rights or any stricture in the Constitution. When they swear an oath to uphold the Constitution as they take office, they laugh at that because they don't believe in the Constitution. They believe in their own power, and they believe that they know better than you do how to run your life. They don't want you to have individual liberty. They don't believe in it. They believe that rights come from the state, and the state gets to selectively determine who gets the rights. So if they buy into critical race theory, which they all do, their whole notion is that we're going to elevate people based on race, and we're going to denigrate people based on race. The white fella is going to be denigrated. He's going to have all his property taken away, and it's going to be redistributed to those of color. And we're going to tell the people of color that they're hopelessly incapable of helping themselves, that they're victims from systemic racism, and that as a result, they should be on welfare in perpetuity. They should get government handouts right and left. And that the guy who's going to pay for it is the other guy who has a white skin tone, little lighter in flesh tone. We're going to make all the lighter flesh tone people pay for all the darker flesh tone people. I mean, what utter nonsense and absolute brutality and destruction of our liberties in this country based on this horrific notion of racism, which we thought we buried in the 1960s. But here it is again. Right. And it's because it's such an effective tool to deprive people of their liberty. Make them hate each other. Make Americans hate each other. And then that divisiveness or divisiveness will result in a foundation for a Marxist revolution. They need the agitation. They need people upset. And if they can get it, then they can champion a Marxist revolution. And that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. Simply divide and conquer. And but I think, as you say, I mean, we are seeing an uprising. There's a groundswell of patriotism coming up. And I think we've got a great new national voice. It was a big win for Virginia, for Glenn Youngkin. But I think, as importantly, in listening to her, I think we've got as big and important a national voice in Winsome Sears as we do in Glenn Youngkin, more so, in fact. She's already thrown down the gauntlet for some kind of a debate with the deplorable racist Joy Reid on MSNBC. And I don't think it will happen. I would love to see it happen. Likewise, the gauntlet was thrown down by Larry Elder, the black talk show host in California, who unfortunately Marxist elected Gavin Newsom again, but he threw down the gauntlet and challenged Ibram X. Kendi to a debate, and Kendi's already refused. So I think we've got some great black patriotic Americans standing up and saying, stop dividing us. And we need this, do we not, Jonathan Emord?
Yeah, this is the rise of the citizen politician with Elder and everybody else. This is the new movement that's afoot. That's rather magnificent. It's extraordinary because Americans are rising in defense of their own country against a really foreign entity that is socialism, that's trying to infect every aspect of our lives and take that country away. And we're not willing to allow that to happen. It took a little while. It took some prodding. But because they've moved so fast in the direction of socialism, people are hurting, and inflation is going nuts. It's going to become stagflation next year, and people are just reeling from this, and everybody understands where it's coming from. And they also understand that the party that is responsible for bringing it to America is utterly unwilling to be held responsible for it and account for it. They're just forging ahead with wild abandon, and people are sick of it, and they won't allow their country to be lost. And what's happening is that we're realizing our strength. We're feeling our oats, so to speak. Suddenly we're finding out that indeed the silent majority is a majority, and that it's only possible for these minority of socialists, rabid socialists, to take all our rights away if we sit back and allow it to happen. If we refuse to allow it to happen, if we become citizen politicians running for school boards, getting involved in running for state offices and federal offices, we can make a difference, and we can shut this thing down and reverse it. And I want to emphasize that once they're in power, like Youngkin, that's not enough. We've got to act. They have to rout out of the Virginia educational establishment every person who is an advocate of CRT and equity training, all the way from the top administrators to the teacher in the classroom. They've got to make a new revolution in education to achieve that objective that Youngkin talked about, which is an exceptional education and one that defends our core values against assault from all of these ridiculous buffoons who want to make us a godless, genderless, and anti-American society.
Jonathan Emord, our guest, constitutional attorney. The book, The Authoritarians, Their Assault on Individual Liberty, the Constitution, and Free Enterprise from the 19th Century to the Present. This is a must-read. This is on my book list. I will download it as soon as I'm off the air at noontime today, sir. I've got to ask you a question, and you don't have to answer this. First of all, I want to know if by administrative state, are you talking about what we affectionately call the deep state?
Well, it overlaps with the deep state. It overlaps with what has been called the swamp. It is the independent regulatory agencies of the federal government, over which there are over 250, and those of the state government. And it was part of the progressive movement, born actually of Friedrich Hegel's collectivism. Friedrich Hegel was a German philosopher who created the concept of collectivism as a rebuttal to individual rights and John Locke's second treatise on government. And he was the teacher of Karl Marx. Marx created Marxism out of Hegelian socialism. And this Hegelian concept caused in the 1860s, as I explained in the book, legions of academics from America to go to Germany, Bonn, Germany, and Heidelberg and elsewhere in Germany to learn of this Hegelian philosophy against classical liberalism. And what they did was utterly destroy the academic foundation of classical liberalism in the United States. Within years, by the time of the 1880s, virtually every major university in America was dominated by Hegelian collectivists, and they recreated graduate and then undergraduate education to rout out classical liberalism in favor of indoctrination in socialism. And they then became the agitators for what was happening in Germany here. In Germany, under Bismarck's Germany, the Hegelians had created an administrative state outside of their legislature to basically rule in place of the legislature. So you'd have experts dictating what rules would be, and those would be implemented by the administrative state and by their legislature. And these academics in America chose to do the same thing. They started at the state level, and by the 1860s, they were really going gangbusters at the state level. And then in the 1880s, they created the first federal regulatory commission, the Interstate Commerce Commission, and then after that, commission after commission. And then in the 1930s, with the Roosevelt administration, it just mushroomed, and we had all of these hundreds of agencies and bureaus, and suddenly we had all aspects of the market being controlled by the government, and they were following in the footsteps, really, of Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler in creating a corporatist state in America through the administrative state. And that was their objective. And this is all explained in detail in the book. Anyway, that's where socialism lives in our government every year, year after year. And it only, people remark, well, how is it possible to have all these BLM and Antifa riots everywhere with no essential police opposition, no federal opposition? It's because of the sympathy of those in the administrative state and the political actors to prevent any action that will crush those criminals. So you don't have them being prosecuted, you don't have them being arrested, you don't have any investigations going on. This is
Right.
all because of this apparatus, which finds sympathy with them and that actually is ideologically aligned with them. People are kind of shocked. You mean to tell me that people who want to destroy the United States are actually in government in the United States? The answer is yes, they definitely are.
Unbelievable. And you make some very good points there. And the gloves are off now. And I think in large part because Donald Trump was a wake-up call to the far left that, okay, this guy is going to make individualism, freedom popular. He's going to literally make America first, make America great again. And that is the antithesis of what they want to see. Now, I after watching the 4 years of the Trump administration go from, the Ukraine to, Russia to the Ukraine to just one thing right after another. You had Eric Swalwell, you had Adam Schiff, you had all of these players and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and the squad. We've got to get rid of Trump. It failed. The riots began. You had Kamala Harris and others bailing the rioters. Any that did get arrested were quickly bailed out. And then COVID made its way in. It sort of segued in as, the final impeachment trial was fading out. This came fading in, the COVID disaster. And I have been under the impression, I'm a conspiracy theorist, I guess. I don't think it's that big a theory, though. I think it's quite plausible, actually. We know Dr. Fauci helped fund gain-of-function research, the NIH, with the Wuhan lab. How likely is it, and this is where I'm going, how likely is it that the deep state or the administrative state allowed, knowingly in this country, allowed COVID-19 to come in here for the ultimate goal of getting rid of Donald Trump and starting the Great Reset, which it did both quite well, I must say. Is that much of a theory?
Yeah. The problem is connecting all of the dots, but let me just say what we do know. And what we do know is that the Wuhan lab was controlled by a scientist, Dr. Shi, who was a corporal in the PLA. All business, all enterprise in communist China is controlled by the party, the Communist Party, and also by the PLA. All information gathered by businesses that has military utility is used by the PLA, obtained and used by the PLA. So there's no distinction to be made between the private sector and the Communist Party in China. We know that. That the government knew that. Fauci knew that. So he's working with this Dr. Shi through proxies intentionally to have the most remarkable thing from the start. Just think about it. You take a country that is an enemy of the United States, Communist China, that has a bioweapons program. You know it. They published it. It's not a secret. They published their military doctrine includes bioweapons that would be used against the West. So Fauci willingly, wittingly, consciously is giving them the technological means by which they can develop a bioweapon. So whether he actually knew the end result of creating a bioweapon is largely irrelevant because he gave them the means to achieve a bioweapon. He's giving the very people, the military of China, the intellectual resources necessary to develop bioweapons. We have a long history of this corrupt activity that Fauci oversaw. This is over a decade of activity with Fauci. Massive amounts of money being poured into that lab, and all said to be for the purpose of giving this lab the means by which to develop a hybrid virus for the purpose of developing vaccines for it. Okay, how ridiculous. You're going to create a new virus that does not exist for the purpose of developing a vaccine to it. That is so nonsensical. Giving it to your enemy, the biological foundation for biological warfare, giving them the resources, even taking cell lines from our Department of Defense and giving it those resources, and then all of this money, and then having EcoHealth work on that gain of function with them, and then also having North Carolina's Dr. Barrett work on it, and supplying them with our intellectual property on how to do it. All of this was done under Fauci's auspices. And so then when you have the actual occurrence, it was entirely predictable. There are all these complaints within NIH and CDC about the terrible containment procedures at these bioweapons facilities like the Wuhan lab in China, and that sooner or later, if you're engaged in this research, it's going to get out. Americans who were scheduled to go over there refused to go over there, several of them, because of the absence of adequate containment. They knew the risk was there. They knew it could get out. Then in January, but right before President Trump is sworn into office, a few weeks before, Fauci gives a lecture at Georgetown University Medical School where he predicts overtly that there will be a pandemic in this coming administration.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, he's absolutely cognizant of the fact that it's going to happen. Why? Because they knew that they had everything necessary to create a pandemic. They had inadequate containment procedures, and they knew that it was starting. They knew the information about people going to the hospital. They knew this was happening. This had happened in October of the year before. They knew it was coming. Now, what does Fauci do? Does he sound the alarm to the Trump administration and say, we better do something extraordinary right now? This is happening in China. The risk is here. I predicted it's coming. No, he does the opposite. He keeps funding the Wuhan lab. He keeps covering up the information about its origins, and he suggests the contrary theory that it's coming from nature with no evidence of that. So this man is evil. He is another Mengele. This guy should be fired, yes, but it should be a thorough investigation, and he should be prosecuted. He's abused his power, and he must take responsibility for this pandemic. There are, all these millions of people worldwide died, and all the economic hardship and ruin that has been caused, and all the people who couldn't go to the hospital because they were packed with people with COVID and they couldn't get in for emergency surgeries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, all of that happened because of causal links back to Fauci. Had Fauci refused to allow cooperation with the communist Chinese on the elements for a bioweapon, this never would happen. And furthermore, we don't have to prove that it was developed as a bioweapon at the time in the Wuhan lab, even though it looks like that. What we know, and this is where it becomes the bioweapon without question, we know that the Chinese knew that this was a virus that was just murderous, and that they stopped all in-country transportation from the Wuhan area to the rest of China, but they purposefully left international flights open, and they allowed the people in Wuhan to get on those flights and fly to Italy and fly to France and fly all over the country and fly to the United States, because they knew. And in their own propaganda, in their own media, they said, and quoted an official of the Chinese Communist Party, high-level official, saying that the United States would drown in a sea of coronavirus. So they're taking full advantage of this. They're using it as a weapon. That's when they used it as a bioweapon. And of course, Brother Joe, who's profited off of his relationship with the communist Chinese for so long, he's never going to make a statement about that. He's never going to do anything in defense of our interests. If you live in Taiwan, say prayers a lot, because Brother Joe is not going to be there with the American military if the Chinese breathe down your back, unless the American people force that result, which is going to be incredibly difficult. Taiwan is in a most precarious position.
They sure are. And the military might of China is just off the charts with these new hypersonic missiles they just tested. And there's more nuclear power than could blow the world up 100 times over. And Joe is just asleep at the wheel, or asleep at the climate summit, paying no attention to any of it. And here we are struggling to try to find out what's going on, struggling to try to get our own rights to have our children safe from being vaccinated, when many high-level doctors are saying, no, you probably shouldn't do it, or at least give people the information that these vaccines are not going to help children unless the kids have, underlying comorbidities. Maybe then it's a good idea to get the shot. But why do you want to mass vaccinate children? Is that more means to the end, do you think? By the way, we're talking with Jonathan Emord, constitutional attorney. You are a wealth of knowledge. Can you speak to that at all, these vaccinations for children?
Sure. There's been a conscious effort on the part of this administration to use selective censorship with the complicity of the media to deny people full information about the vaccines. We have all these adverse event reports pouring into the government about adverse events with the vaccine, more adverse events associated with this vaccine than all other vaccines combined. And yet there's no serious inquiry about about which individuals are prone to having adverse effects. And there's no serious inquiry at all about the long-term safety risks of the vaccines. And information is only one-sided. Vaccines are good, they're safe, go get them, you have to get them. Then you have mandates. This is entirely antithetical not only to the Constitution, not only an offense to our individual rights, but it's a gross insult to our intelligence. The solution to this problem is not to have government prescribe a one-size-fits-all approach to it. The solution to this problem, which is so complex and involves immunities that vary greatly from person to person, the solution has to be tailored to each person. And therapeutics play a critical role in this thing, as we should very well know now, because the vaccine wanes. We know that. And we know that people who are vaccinated can carry the virus and transmit it to others. So the vaccine is not the one-size-fits-all answer. Ultimately, we're going to have to face the reality that the bullets we have right now afford significant treatment options and a vaccine that is broken, that does not give us fulsome immunity forever. It gives us it for a little while, but it's not the answer. So what's going to happen? What's likely to happen? What's likely to happen over time is that sooner or later, everybody is going to get this. 150 plus million Americans already had it. We're probably all going to get it at some point. And as it evolves through the human biome all around the world, this virus is going to become less lethal. That's what most epidemiologists and immunologists suspect. That's not told to people. And so people, as their vaccines wane, increasingly are going to get this thing. They're going to have milder symptoms, perhaps, and then they're going to survive in greater numbers. And we all want everyone to survive this thing. It's horrific, but ultimately we're going to have to come to deal with it that way, and our immune system is going to adapt to it. And the thing that they suppress, which is just so grotesque, is the great benefit of natural immunity. I mean, why wouldn't, if you were honest, you would give all the scientific information. The government would just be an information clearinghouse and would allow people to decide what is in their own best interest and allow them to consult with their doctors. Dr. Joe, who's has the temporal and spatial awareness issues, should not be America's doctor. He doesn't even have an MD. He doesn't even have a brain. He's more like the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. He really is incapable of giving us the answer. No one should look to Dr. Joe. They should look to their own doctor, and they should come up with their own solutions based on the best available scientific information, and that information should flow freely in this country. We need innovation. We need the scientific and medical communities to constantly be innovating. We need our individual doctors to innovate. They need to say, okay, I've studied your immune system. This is what we need to do to make it stronger. This is what we need to do to protect you. Oh, you should try this. You're going into a danger zone. Take this ivermectin, whatever. And then all the lies that they propagate, all the lies, particularly on natural immunity. We know from the overwhelming scientific evidence that if you get this thing, you have a fulsome immunity that may be lifelong against reinfection. And in fact, you can't carry the virus if you've been infected with it and have overcome it. So you're the superior person. But yet in this OSHA rule that they just adopted, they give no credit whatsoever to natural immunity. They poo-poo it. They say that it's the subject of enormous controversy, which is directly contrary to the fact. There's more evidence to support natural immunity and its fulsome protection than there is by far to support that the vaccine is effective for more than 4 or 5 months. So, you know, what absurdity. We live in this altered sense of reality because the government has made it so. And they're gaining power by controlling information. And that power is to your detriment because that information you could use to decide what is in your own best interest. Instead, they're forcing you to accept just this mantra: go get vaccinated. It's safe. It's effective. Go get vaccinated. That's the message over and over and over again. And of course, it is imperfect. We know that. And the imperfections vary from person to person. And they admit in the basic science that, hey, look, this is experimental. Some people will have a better immune response to the vaccine, and they'll have a longer immune response.
Right.
And some people might even not have an immune response at all. Some people are being forced into this who have no immune response. Some people already have a fulsome immunity from natural immunity, and they're being forced to get all these spike proteins in their body from the vaccine, and they're having adverse reactions to that over hyper reaction to their immune system because they're, you know, so this is a dumb way to approach science. Politics always is horrendous in overwhelming the details of science. We need to, this is an art, this is medicine. This requires medical intelligence combined with science, combined with evidence of your specific circumstances to know what's best for you. That's what they're denying. This is collectivism. This is the ultimate collectivism. Everyone line up. Go and get your shot. Right. You will get your shot again. Where are your papers?
Yep.
Does this sound familiar?
Lockstep. That's absolutely right. Jonathan Emord, our guest. The book, his book is The Authoritarians, Their Assault on Individual Liberty, the Constitution, and Free Enterprise from the 19th century to present. And this, we could do this all afternoon. I mean, you're an amazing wealth of knowledge, and we'll rebroadcast this. There's no question about that, because this is some of the most solid information. And I love the Constitution. I love somebody who knows the Constitution as well as you do, sir. And as I say, I wish we had more time, but we don't. But I do encourage people to get the book, The Authoritarians, Their Assault on Individual Liberty, the Constitution, and Free Enterprise from the 19th century to present. I do have one question. We're getting a lot of great comments here. People absolutely loving what you have to say. I wanted to get Heather's question in, though. I didn't even pre-read it, but Heather, and I apologize for taking so long. I want to add to the question. I missed the first question. For defamation of character, let's say I want to run for office someday, and they have me listed as a bully several times when it's not true. I mean, how do you combat defamation of character legally if you're in the public spotlight, if you're, running for politics or a politician? We've learned in broadcasting that, people are pretty much open to ridicule and things like that when they're in the public eye. But where does the law come in on cases like this?
Well, a public figure has a very hard time of it because they have to establish actual malice, which is reckless disregard of the truth or knowing falsity by those who communicate their criticisms. And most criticisms are characterized by the courts as opinion, which is not actionable in defamation. There are some instances where people have been lambasted and their character impugned, who are public figures and people in Hollywood and so forth who have succeeded in their defamation actions. But the courts have limited such actions to a universe of false facts that are essentially defamatory on their face, or if resort to extrinsic evidence is necessary, can be shown to produce damages that are actual monetary damages or reasonably so calculable damages. So it's a very hard way to go to argue defamation. I would suggest that if you are in the public spotlight, the best means, the most efficient means, is simply to address it directly, to combat the ideas with your own ideas, to rely on the marketplace of ideas to ferret out the truth. That is hard, I know, in this current environment where the media tends to be dominated by as a propaganda mill for the Democratic Party.
Right.
But nonetheless, it still remains, I think, the best and most efficient means in most instances to address these questions, simply because the courts are not an expedient or viable means to save you before you would go up for an election.
Right. Well, thank you for the advice. Thank you for your time. Jonathan Emord. Great name, Jonathan. I love it. You have a great day. I hope to have you back. I mean, this has been most amazing, most educational.
Well, you bet. Happy to be with you.
You have a great day. Have a great weekend, my friend.
Take care. You too.
Bye, Jonathan.